Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted and privileged to welcome a very, very senior and accomplished professional from Austin, Texas, USA, Mr. Matthew Cooke. Matthew, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Ash. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Mr. Cooke is an executive coach and facilitator at Evolution. He's the founder of Body-Based Breakthrough, and he's a trauma certified with organic intelligence for nervous system integration. Matthew, you seem to have done some amazing work. And before we get into discussions about Body-Based Breakthrough and coaching, tell me your own journey in brief.
Yeah, I think probably the best place to start is probably a story. I started in my early 20s, Ash, as I think a lot of young, excited folks jumping into the workforce. I worked for a startup where we were building the Netflix for optimal living was kind of the idea. It was let's educate the world in self-development, personal development. But the irony was we were told to meditate, we were told to do yoga, all of these things, and we worked 70+ hour work weeks, as everyone does in tech. We had the TGIM, thank God it's Monday, so we can keep working. We were, even like Adderall was quite, which for those who don't know, it's just a stimulant that keeps people awake and focused, which is obviously not a very natural way of getting into a flow state by any means. And it was just a culture of hustle and grind, and that was in the early 2000s where that was very in vogue to do that. And I burnt out, Ash, at 24 years old. My adrenals just completely gave out. I mean, I remember one morning waking up and turning over just to try to get my phone, and I couldn't even fully turn over. Now, mind you, I was very young. Like, burnout usually doesn't occur, and most of my clients that I work with are in their late 30s, early 40s is usually when those signs really start to show up. But my body decided at my early 20s that it was time to give me that lesson. And I remember at the time, my girlfriend, who eventually became my wife, she wasn't even sorry for me. She was more angry. And she said, and she actually got out of bed and she just started yelling at me and said, "I am so sick of you being sick." She said, "When you're home, you're sick. And when you're at work, you're working. And so I never really get you." And she stormed out. And I remember thinking, is she ever going to come back? I remember seeing the door slam and immediately grabbing for my phone to try to look at my bank accounts. I needed to do an I'm sorry dinner, obviously, and I needed to get her jewelry and flowers and all these things. But as a result of having done that so many times, I didn't have any money in my accounts. So that for me was rock bottom. That like I wasn't really performing at the level that I needed to at work. I wasn't performing in my relationship in the way that I needed to. And obviously financially I wasn't doing well either, because I was trying to cover up for everything else that was happening. And so as a result, that was the moment that I decided I needed to banish burnout in the workplace forever. Like that is my work in this world. Ash. So I don't know if that gives a little bit of
it's an amazing story, and thank you for sharing such an intimate part of your life with me on my show. Thank you. So let's now move to Body-Based Breakthrough. You're the founder of this venture. Tell me a little bit about it.
Yeah, it's a system. It's a technology that I've been teaching to my clients now for close to a decade, actually, I think just over a decade now. I've been doing this one-on-one with my clients and eventually started getting to share it with I've been very blessed. I've gotten to share with folks at SpaceX and a couple, Snapchat, Google, a couple different people and organizations around the globe. And I've been very blessed in that, because it's a really special technology where we're essentially using the mind and the nervous system's ability to integrate
Mm-hmm.
information.
Mm-hmm.
So we have sort of two different modes of attention, which is directed attention, just kind of obvious, right? We spend most of our days directing our and trying to really focus our attention. And then we have this other kind of attention that's called undirected attention,
Mm-hmm.
which we all experience this, Ash, when we're in the shower or when we're on a nice walk in nature.
Mm-hmm.
Suddenly, inspiration strikes,
Yep.
right? We get these moments of insight. And
Mm-hmm.
so I noticed that I was having that when I was on the yoga mat. So as a result of burning out, I've spent well over six figures in mentorship training, different trainings across the years to figure out what was going on with my body and my mind and why they weren't working. And one of them was yoga. So I've been teaching yoga now for over a decade as well. And that was noticing on the yoga mat, I got really good ideas. Like I would say my best ideas. And I remember at the time teachers saying things, and you may have heard this too, Ash, where they say, just let your thoughts pass like clouds, and just, which I think is beautiful in some ways. But a lot of times I would go, wait, but these are my best thoughts. Like, why am I letting these go? And so I created a very simple journaling system. We have a book for it as well, but a really simple journaling system around how to capture these thoughts and actually move them forward in my life. And so that's why it's been a really valuable tool for organizations. And I use it inside of my coaching because it's kind of a way for us to create spaciousness for a moment, especially when I feel like I'm up against something in my life. Does that make sense? So
Yep.
like on a conscious level, I kind of keep hitting my head against the wall. So let's take a few moments to sort of step back, step away from the problem, take a few deep breaths, even do a little bit of simple movement. And that's why we call it body-based breakthrough. I'm getting a breakthrough through my body. And so just some simple movement, and then suddenly, boom, the idea comes. There's this really cool story and I'll make it really brief. Thomas Edison, the inventor of the light bulb, obviously that's a little contested. Some people say Nikola Tesla, but the idea being Edison had over 1,000 patents.
Correct.
And one of the ways he would get his ideas is he would hold two metal ball bearings in his hand. Have you ever heard this story, Ash?
No.
This is so cool. He would hold two metal ball bearings and he would write down in his journal in front of him, he would write down a problem that he was working on or a challenge, like how does the filament work in the light bulb? I just can't figure it out on a conscious level. He would start to sit back in his chair, he would close his eyes, and he would let that sort of problem circulate through his mind while he drifted off to sleep. And so he would take these cat naps throughout the middle of the day. We call them polyphasic sleep, which just means many phases. He would sleep throughout the day, taking these short naps. We all know there's a point in sleep where our muscles start to go limp. And so his hand would slowly open up, the ball bearings would roll out of his hand. At about 15 minutes or so, they'd crash to the floor and he would wake up with the creative solution to his problem.
Wow.
Pretty fun, right?
What an amazing story. What an amazing story.
And so that's it. That's really the
Amazing
magic
story.
behind it. Yeah, that's body-based breakthrough.
Amazing. Fabulous. So let's talk a little bit now about coaching. You work exclusively with tech leaders to transform their confidence, energy, and time to get more done without burning out. And now I understand the burning out part.
Right.
But help me understand the other components that you'd put together when you work with coaching.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think so part of it is the nervous system work that I do. So a lot of it is we're really trying to organize somebody in the direction of growth that's most meaningful to them. So I find that with a lot of my clients, they sometimes when they come to me, sometimes it's in a career transition where we just find that they're not either they are burning out or there's just a level of dissatisfaction with the work that they're doing, or even the impact that they're able to make. Obviously, they're working with a lot of millennials, and I know for the millennial generation, that's very much so a big thing, is to make sure I'm making an impact in the world, and then I'm finding meaningful work. And I think even very much so, even more so for Gen Z, the generation coming up as well. And tech is historically been a young person's game. And so I've been very blessed that I've gotten to work with people in helping them align more and more towards what's meaningful for them. And so really it's eliciting inside of them some more of their confidence and bringing it forth. So I like to think of myself as a thought partner
Mm,
for somebody, and really reflecting back to them the pieces of them that are organizing towards their greatest joys, their greatest pleasures. So
absolutely.
I don't actually spend a lot of time in my coaching going deep into their childhood traumas and
Yeah,
things like
yeah.
that. And and that's
No,
fun, that's
no, no.
valuable. I get
I
it.
guess you're more a business coach, and I think that is very,
Yeah,
very important today.
yeah.
But as I
Mhm.
have been listening to your own story, and when I was reading about you, I was
Yeah.
wondering how has your own background supported
Mm.
your coaching philosophy, your own style, and your values?
Yeah, oh, that's such a wonderful question. Yeah, I mean, I think, as we said earlier, Ash, I think it's because I burnt out. I burnt
Mm,
out so young myself, and I was just, I felt like I was in my own personal hell, and I needed to figure out a way out of that. Needed to understand what was
mm,
going on in my body, what was going on in my mind, and why the two weren't communicating.
yeah.
I felt like there was this real disconnect because I know people talk about the mind body connection all the time, but I actually talk about it. We refer to it in our book, in the Body Based Breakthrough Journal. We talk a lot about the mind body relationship,
Hmm.
and that there's actually a conversation happening all the time between my mind and my body, and that ideally I'm not just using my body to schlep my brain around,
Mm,
but that it's actually there's a true connection between the two of them and a true relationship.
mm,
So better understanding that relationship for me has been incredibly valuable.
mm,
And so I would say growing up, I didn't have I think a lot of us grow up in households where we may not be able to hear our own thinking very well, or understand our emotional world. And so I think getting to start to do that in my 20s and 30s
mm,
has been really, really, and was really, really valuable in helping to shape who I coach and how I coach them. One of the models that we use, I'll say really quick,
mm,
at Evolution, which is we're sort of the premier Silicon Valley consulting firm. So
mhm.
I don't think I got to say that necessarily, but we're doing coaching, culture, leadership development, and
Mm,
partnering with some of the startup high growth companies. And
yeah.
one of the things that we really focus on is we have a model that we teach called I, we, it.
Hmm.
So working with the individual is the I, right? So their belief systems, how they manage their calendar, how do they manage themselves throughout a
Mm,
work day, throughout a
mm,
work week, throughout a quarter. Then we have the we, which is the culture. How do
mm,
we communicate here implicitly or explicitly at this organization? And then there's the it, which is for some folks the most fun part, right? That's the systems, the procedures, the
mm,
the the actual product that we're putting out into the world. And
mm,
so burnout can happen at any of those levels. And
mm,
so I think for me, I really enjoy the I and the we very much so, obviously, but systems play a huge role as well. If we have really broken systems that we
mm,
have to always recreate the wheel, that becomes very draining for people.
mm,
But I'd say my two places where I really find the most fun is in the we, and talking about how are we working together as a culture,
mm,
and
mm,
then working with the individual as
mm.
well. So that
What a great
hopefully
response.
shares a little bit, yeah,
Great response. Thank
informing
you.
that. Yeah.
And one of the other things that I have seen, and I'm much older, but there are always people who have influenced us or guided us in our lives. I'd
Yeah.
love to get your perspective on how have you been shaped by some of the people in your life, and how are they influencing
Yeah.
you as a coach today?
Yeah. Yeah. You know what's so funny? I love this question, Ash. This is a phenomenal one. Because I guess I'm sort of a weirdo. Like I think I've really enjoyed sort of this very like if obviously Tony Robbins when I first got started was great. He's a
Mhm.
very masculine, very strong, intense energy, and it's very you rah rah. Let's take massive action. And then I also was very drawn to Kundalini yoga,
Mm.
and some of these like
Yeah.
slightly more feminine practices and yin yoga and some of these movement modalities. So I was sort of on two ends of the spectrum where I think I really enjoy a really strong masculine understanding of the world, and then a very strong feminine.
Mm.
So a very balanced approach. So I really enjoy Bill Campbell, the we just recently, there was a book that came out called Trillion Dollar Coach.
Yeah.
CEO at Intuit and coached a lot of leaders over the years. And then I also really love Moshe Feldenkrais, who is a
Mm.
really famous movement teacher,
Yeah.
came out of Israel. You're
Mm.
familiar with Moshe?
Yeah. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah.
Mm.
So I'm kind of across the spectrum, and like I'm really interested in business leaders, and I'm really interested in movement and nervous system regulation work. So for me, it's where those two collide, is really the nexus of what's interesting to me.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
My next
Yeah.
question is on culture. First,
Yeah.
you live in a country which is multicultural. Then you work in an industry which is the tech, which is even more multicultural.
Hmm.
So my question to you, Matthew, is how does culture impact coaching?
Oh man, so much so. I think I would say my favorite part about the coaching process, Ash, is listening.
Mm.
I know it's funny because ironically in this format, right, it's a lot of me talking, but I actually really enjoy listening and getting to
Okay.
know somebody's world.
Mm. Mm.
So I would say my first couple sessions with a client, I'm pretty quiet
Yeah.
because I actually really want to take in as much of your world as
Mm.
possible. I want
Mm.
to understand who you are and where you come from,
Mm.
because I can never really help take you in a direction if we don't know where you are.
Mm.
We need to know where you are to know where you're going to go.
Correct.
And so I'm always trying to elicit that from somebody, especially, yeah, like you said, if they come from a different culture or a different way of living than I did.
Mm.
I always want to really know somebody and who they are.
Mm.
And then when it comes to organizationally, like we need to be very, very clear on who are the types of folks that we hire. Are we a high performing kind of team
Mm.
that just kind of expects, that we're even going to cut corners to make things happen? Or are we a team that's very slow and conservative with our decision making, and it needs to come to a consensus? And I've worked in both organizations
Mm.
personally, and then I've obviously coached in both organization
Yeah.
types of organizations personally as well.
Mm.
So
Mm.
I'm just very slow to make uh, to make decisions right away. I
Mm.
really want to listen first and
Mm.
foremost, because culture plays such a big role. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well
I
said.
want to turn the mic around, Ash, because I want to hear all these answers for you too. Because obviously
No,
you're of
I,
all
I
your
will. I will. I will
experiences.
answer whatever questions you have when we conclude our session, because this whole
Yeah.
show is all about you.
Yeah.
Uh, my next question to you is about the young leaders. The millennials and the Gen Z leaders. And
Mhm.
as you said very rightly, a lot of tech is young leaders.
Mhm.
Um, and I have a lot of respect for the young leaders because they're bringing new perspectives into the
Yeah.
corporate world, into the way they think, into even things like sustainability. But I'm from the boomers generation, and there's a very different kind of a perspective. And I'm not saying which was right or wrong.
Sure.
As a coach, what are the areas in your view millennials and Gen Z leaders need to get some inputs in?
Hmm. Around sustainability, or just,
No, as just leaders.
oh, just as leaders?
Hmm.
That's a wonderful question. Yeah. I think across the board, I think workplace culture, I think, is definitely transforming. I
Hmm.
think the 40-hour work week is really antiquated at this point. I think we're
Hmm.
we're we're realizing that, especially with hybrid work and with the pandemic, I think we're recognizing a lot, and we're doing a lot of work at Evolution around at our firm around helping to shift the hybrid model, and in that people are getting, it's interesting, Ash. People are performing higher than they've ever performed.
Yeah,
And yet management feels very insecure about the fact that we're not all in one building.
correct.
And so a lot of times there's a lot of oversight that's happening right
Hmm.
now. A lot of peeping over people's shoulders to make sure that their mouses are moving enough. And it's
Hmm.
like it's this very so I think that there's a lot happening right now for the younger generations around what is proper workplace culture to
Hmm.
perform at a high level, to feel creatively expressed as well.
Hmm. Hmm.
Uh, and I think, yeah, like you said, sustainability. I think to make sure that the world is hopefully left, for generations far beyond us.
Hmm.
And obviously, I think AI is very, very big, and that's
Yeah.
that's going to be the next big thing. I was actually recently reading about this, that mobile and the cloud have been really big now for the last decade or so. But what's next? And it really is AI. That's like the closest thing that we have that we can really, obviously crypto kind of, the crypto Web3 stuff is happening, but I think very much so AI and
absolutely, and the metaverse.
And the metaverse.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's really powerful. We've been, and I'm very interested too in augmented reality as opposed to, I think the metaverse is fascinating, but we're my own personal, because I'm very rooted in the biology, right?
Yeah.
And what I've studied has been in how the body works. So something that's interesting to me about the metaverse, and this is going to be very controversial, is that I think in the metaverse, we kind of lose touch with reality, right? In a sense, because we are in a new reality. But augmented reality is different. That's actually enhancing our ability to be in the world. So some of the ways that Snapchat is starting to work on AR right now is very fascinating to me. So it's helping us engage with the world in a newer, more enhanced way versus even Evan Spiegel, the CEO, said something similar recently about what Facebook is creating in some ways is almost like escapism, which is great too. And sometimes we need escapism. We need to sort of be out of our own lives for a little bit. But I personally think it's really powerful, the idea of how do we engage with the world around us in a more impactful, powerful way. So that's my 2 cents. Again, very controversial.
Very fascinating. So time for 2 more questions. You did talk a little bit about your book. Tell me a little bit about your book.
So we wrote a journal, and it has a book component in that there's about 75 pages of context before you hop in. So obviously, body-based breakthrough is it's a practice, it's a methodology, it's a technology that someone can use on a daily basis.
If you have it, please show it to us.
Oh, yeah. Can I? It's literally a foot away. Let me just grab it. Yep. So here is what it looks like.
Oh, wonderful.
It's very, very simple, very, very intentionally. We made it very, very simple. But when you open it up, there's about 75 pages or so of context that really explains the methodology. We got some fun pictures that really just shares the value of doing this over time and the really compounding effect that it has to do this practice. And then we have about 90 days worth of journal pages for you so that you can do this practice.
You can do your notes.
So and that's really it, is it's a landing pad for you to really have your best ideas. So I can even tell people right now, they don't even need to buy the journal if they don't want to understand this methodology, and that we have a headline. We have the thing that I'm working on, just like Thomas Edison. How does the filament work in the light bulb? So it's usually a what or a how question. And then we have my desired experience. And this doesn't have to be floofy. This can actually be like, how do I want to experience this problem that I'm currently experiencing? And then it's amazing because the brain is very gestalt in that it likes forming connections. And so if I have a sense of what the problem is in a way, and really in a sense the solution, because my desired experience is trust, is confidence, is power, is play, whatever it may be, the brain starts to make some connections. It's fascinating. And then we start to have ideas. And then where the rubber meets the road is then we get inspired actions. So we'll have 1 or 2 inspired actions. And we encourage people, there's something called the inspiration horizon. Have you heard of this, Ash?
No.
You might enjoy this if you haven't. So we have 48 hours to take action on inspiration. Otherwise, that inspiration begins to wane, right? We've all experienced that. Like, I don't take my word for it, right? We've all experienced it, right? You have a great idea on Sunday, you don't take action, and it's like Wednesday. You go, it was a good idea. I'll get around to it. And it kind of fades. But if you take action, you get the idea on Sunday, you take action Sunday night, Monday morning, all of a sudden this ball of momentum just starts rolling down the hill and you start really taking off in that area. So I always encourage people to take this to form an initiative if you're part of an organization, or to put this into your calendar if you're an individual for the next 24, 48 hours. Like, let's really make this thing a thing.
Absolutely. Fantastic. And my last question to you, Matthew, and this is for the many, many people who will listen to our conversation. Based on your own learnings, your own amazing journey, what would you say are 3 lessons or 3 learnings you want our viewers and listeners to take away from your own journey and from our conversation?
Consistency over intensity. That's the very first one. Consistency over intensity. I think that we all are in a marathon of
Yeah.
our work lives, and we're not in a sprint. So let's stop acting like we're going to end work in a month or in a year. Let's pretend like we're going to work for the rest of our lives and build consistent routines and habits rather than trying to do it all in 1 hour on the weekend. Consistency over intensity. Number two would probably be that there's a real pattern that we find towards healing for people, which is 3 steps. It's awareness, acceptance, inspired action. So awareness and acceptance, inspired action. And I think that we a lot of times miss that second step, acceptance of where I've been, and acceptance of what I really need and really want in this next season or time in my life. So awareness, acceptance, inspired action. What's the third one?
Not to worry.
No, it's great. I'm going to think of something here. I think it's probably just that we have a lot of really smart people on this planet, and I think it's just ensuring that you're doing work that you actually care about.
Very interesting.
I think that's just so important. I think because it's important. So one of my biggest things I think with clients is I want to make sure that they're doing work where they feel like their nervous system can be regulated. And if I'm sort of manic and depressed and sad or whatever it is, I'm going to create work and produce products coming from that place. So especially if I'm in tech and everyone has their phone all the time and I'm creating apps or products that are perpetuating that into the culture, that's no good. So I want people that are grounded, that are enthused about the work that they're doing, because it's just going to then go out into the world.
Well said. And on that note, and your 3 amazing lessons or words of wisdom, which is consistency over intensity. We are in a marathon and not a sprint. And while dealing with people, be aware, accept, and have inspired action, and do work you care about. Thank you, Matthew, for speaking to me about your amazing journey. Thank you to start with sharing your own story. Thank you for the wonderful story about Edison and the ball bearings and what made him think. Thank you for talking to me at such length about your thoughts on coaching. And finally, thank you for talking to me about your book. Thank you again, and good luck to you.
Thanks so much, Ash. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.